In the centre of Nicosia, the sound of sirens echoes through the streets. All over the Republic of Cyprus, at 8:20 this morning, this was the sound reminding the country of what happened 40 years ago. The year the island was divided in two by a military coup and the arrival of Turkish forces. Today, Nicosia is the only divided capital in the world. You've got Turkish Cypriots living just a few streets away, separated by a border called the buffer zone from the Greek Cypriots here in the south. Much is known about the events that separated the two communities in 1974, but the troubles started far earlier in the 1960s, when the relationship between the two sides started falling apart. In 1960, the country gained independence after years of British colonial rule. Hopes were high, but it didn't last long. The leaders started struggling to implement their new constitution, and as the years passed, frustrations spilled out onto the streets. In December 1963, armed gangs from the Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot communities turned on each other. There were kidnappings and beatings. Casualties were widespread. Britain tried to help restore peace, but the fighting didn't stop. And on the 4th of March 1964, the UN took action. A peacekeeping mission was established to patrol the streets, and the first division line, the Green Line, was drawn across the city. Richard Sale, a retired army colonel, was on island during the 60s. His father worked at the British High Commission at the time and saw the diplomatic struggles firsthand.
My father not only met Makarios socially, but dealt with him during the problems. During those 3 years after independence, tension had been mounting. Both members of the community maintained armed forces. So there were upset people, disappointed people, suspicious people with guns, and it was just really waiting to kick off.
Fighting between the two sides escalated in 1967 in the village of Kofinu. Turkish forces threatened to intervene on more than one occasion, but things calmed down for a while. But behind the scenes, the EOKB campaign was emerging in Greece, plotting to overthrow the Cypriot government. And on the 15th of July 1974, the National Guard staged a military coup aimed at uniting the country with Greece. The President Archbishop Makarios was overthrown but escaped, and Nikos Samson was put in place. 5 days later, in response, Turkish troops arrived carrying out a full-scale military operation.
Now, about 4 minutes past 6, and the first of the Turkish troops have landed in Cyprus. About 5 of these aircraft passed over in the last 5 minutes. They were guided in by jet fighters, and the very first paratroopers are now hitting Cyprus soil. Over there, Alan.
Just outside the capital, the arrival of Turkish paratroopers could be seen from Nicosia Airport, where the UN patrolled today.
What you can see is you've got the Kyrenia Mountains over there to our right, just the other side of the watchtower. That's all dead ground, that's all flat plain area up there. The sky is basically full of planes and parachutes at 6:30 a.m. Some of the RAF workers here at Nicosia were completely overawed and shocked by the scale of the airborne troops that were coming here. They didn't believe that it was going to happen and it was going to happen so soon.
The human cost of the violence was dear. Loved ones were killed, kidnapped or disappeared. Homes were destroyed. Thousands became refugees overnight, having to leave their villages behind. The country was torn apart. The Greek Cypriots see the arrival of Turkish forces as an invasion and their presence in the north of the island as an illegal occupation. But the Turkish Cypriots see it as a peace operation to protect their community. However you view the events, at times they were both brutal and harrowing, displacing hundreds and thousands of people on both sides. Turkish forces now control up to 36% of the island, separated with a border 180 kilometres long. People can now travel across checkpoints either side, but the buffer zone is still a no man's land, a divide that separates communities that once lived in peace side by side. And 40 years on, it hasn't changed. And the pain hasn't gone away. Carla Prater, Forces News at Nicosia in Cyprus.